Gavin. Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, well, thanks, Alan. How are you?
Frightened by my tax return.
Yeah, it can be a scary time, but this year, for some reason, the ATO is actually not wanting or pressuring people to get their tax returns done as soon as possible. So it's an interesting stage this year.
Well, that's a funny thing, isn't it? Because, I know in the past when I've been in Australia around this time of year, there are ads on TV saying, fill your form in, send it in now.
Yeah.
There's nothing, is there?
Well, there's a bit of that, but the way that it works these days, if you actually complete your return online, there's two different mechanisms they've got this year to do that. But if you use those online mechanisms, it's actually better to wait until early August so that as much of the pre-filled information can be completed as possible. If you do it right now, all that information isn't necessarily available, and so they're actually suggesting do it in August, and then you'll get most of it completed for you rather than having to do it manually.
How easy is it to do the computer thing?
It's generally pretty easy. It's a step-by-step process that you walk through, and this year they've introduced an additional version of it. In the past, and this year they've got this version called eTax, which is more of the comprehensive online way of submitting your tax return, but they've introduced a new one this year called MyTax, and this is just if you've got very basic details of some employment income, some work-related deductions, a little bit of interest or possibly dividends, some donations, and if that's all you've got, then this simplified MyTax version, particularly if you wait until August, might be a really simple way for you to submit your return.
But in some countries, they actually don't do a tax return. I've, as you know, moved over from New Zealand earlier in the year. In New Zealand, it's all pay as you earn. You don't fill a tax form in unless you've got something weird going on in your life. Most people don't see a tax form from one year to the next.
Yeah, it would be an ideal scenario to be in, wouldn't it? But in Australia, we've got this self-assessment mechanism where the responsibility is put on us to actually submit the tax return. And whilst that enables us some flexibility, if we do get audited and we haven't done the right thing, then we could face some penalties. Yeah, we have got that self-assessment mechanism.
So who should actually complete a form?
Well, if you've earned over a certain level, or you need to get some money back from the government because you've paid some tax in some way, and that might just be through earning dividends if you're not employed. So if you need to get some money back, if you've earned over a certain threshold, and it's $18,000 or a little bit more than that, if you've earned under that, then you generally wouldn't have to. But the ATO has actually got a little questionnaire, or almost an online questionnaire that if you answer all the questions to it, it'll determine whether you actually need to submit a tax return or not. And because the lowest tax rate, so the no tax rate, has been increased from, say, it used to be around $6,000, now it's $18,000, there's a whole lot more people that don't need to actually submit a return.
From a purely selfish point of view, as you know, I've moved over from New Zealand, but there are a lot of people who have maybe moved into the country in the last year. The figure's like hundreds of thousands of people probably have paid some tax overseas and some tax here. So if I have paid, for instance, less than $18,000 in my time that I've been here, does that then mean that I don't pay any tax?
It potentially could, but you've raised a really important issue.
I love to pause.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really challenging one with foreign income and living overseas and moving into Australia or a different country, because it often gets down to the reciprocal tax arrangements that that Australia has with the various countries. And so I'm not a tax agent. I don't actually do tax returns, but even for those people that do those tax returns, there's a limited number of people who are fully across all the international tax regimes. They can actually look them up and just do the research through the information that's provided by the ATO, but you really do have to check out each individual circumstance.
Very complicated.
Yeah, it can be.
So what are the key things then that you should remember?
The key things to remember is when to lodge a tax return. So if you've determined that you do need to lodge one, then if you do it yourself, then you need to do it by the 31st of October 2014. So ideally after August, or in August, but before October. You can choose to, if you want to, have a registered tax agent do it for you. And if you do that and the tax agent registers, but that they're going to do it for you before the end of October, then you've got actually a little bit more time. It's up until about May that you need to that registered tax agents can submit your return. So there's a bit more time frame if you go down that track. If you need help with it, you can actually obviously get a registered tax agent to help you with it. You can get family and friends, or I noticed on the ATO website that there's a whole pool of volunteers that particularly focused on low income earners that need to submit tax returns. If you need an assistance but don't have a lot of money to go out and pay for that assistance, then look up the ATO website, and they've got these list of people who are trained but are free and can help you lodging your return.
That's a cool idea. It seems like they're doing everything they can to help you get it right.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's in their vested interest to get everything submitted so that they can collect the tax that's owed to them. By the way, if you don't submit your tax return within the time frames, and a lot of people don't get it done by the 31st of October, if you actually owe money to the ATO, then you could face some penalties or interest on the money that you owed. But if you actually owed money, the ATO is going to give you a refund, then generally there's no penalty as long as you're voluntarily submitting your tax return at some point in the future, and you're not trying to avoid paying tax or avoid lodging your tax return when the ATO asks you to.